A few weeks ago here on MCrider, I told you guys the story of my eye, why it stays dilated, and why MCrider means so much to me today, more than just an ordinary YouTube channel. The purpose of MCrider is to help you guys gain motorcycle skill, whether it's on-bike skill or your road strategy to help keep you safer and to help get you home from that next ride when you go out on it. And I promise you that that's the goal and the purpose of MCrider. And it's my plan to continue going down that path to help develop more and more value for you guys and to create a true training site to help riders develop their skill on a motorcycle. From time to time, I'll share stories about what's going on in my life and how you can know me a little bit better. And I got such great feedback from the story on my eye that I thought I would share another one this week. So if you're offended by things of spiritual nature, I know I got some comments on that last week. If you're offended by those kind of things or you think there should be a warning ahead of time, well, now consider this your warning because that's what we're getting ready to get into. And if you're bothered by it, it doesn't bother me at all. And if you want to click out and stop the video here at this point, I have no problem with that either. We'll see you next Friday for a training video. We'll release a motorcycle training video every Friday morning, and I'll see you back next Friday if you want to click out at this point. So you've been officially warned, and if you're here still watching this, then it's nobody's fault but your own, right? Because you're still here watching it. You can click off and watch some cornering video if you want to do that. But if you're still here, I guess that you want to hear what I've got to say this week. As I shared in that earlier video about my eye, my goal in life was to make a career out of the military. That's what I really wanted to do, and that's what I set up all for through college, was to develop a career in the military. I enlisted in the Army in 1985. I got commissioned as a second lieutenant in 1989. And before that commissioning ceremony, as a part of the ROTC program, they have something called an advanced camp. And to be honest with you, I thought this advanced camp was just going to be a breeze. I'd already been to basic training as an enlisted soldier, and I'd been to tech school, and I thought this advanced camp thing was going to be a total breeze. And I was kind of wrong. It was more challenging than I thought it would be. So I went to the advanced camp in the summer of 1988 in Fort Riley, Kansas. Now, Fort Riley at the time still had big open bay barracks, the World War II style barracks. And that's what we were staying at. I'm sure you guys have seen those before. Just a big white building on the inside. It's a big corridor with wooden floors and just row after row of metal bunk beds with a foot locker at the end of each bunk bed. And that's where we were staying at. No air conditioning. You just kind of open the windows up at night and hope a little cool breeze would blow through to help keep you cool in the evening. So we'd been in Fort Riley for several weeks up to this point, and I'd kind of been adopted as the honorary chaplain of our barracks. The guys got to know me a little bit. They knew what my plans were to become a chaplain in the Army. They'd give me a hard time about things that I would do or wouldn't do, and it was all in good fun. In fact, it developed a lot of camaraderie within our barracks and helped bring us closer as a group. So as the weeks went along, we were building up towards this final mission, this training period where we would be evaluated as leaders and they would get a chance to put us under as much stress as they could, and they could see how we would handle being put under that kind of stress. The week prior to going out to the field, I began to develop, initially it felt like just a cold, kind of a runny nose and achy feeling. And instead of getting better, though, it continued to get worse. And by the time we were ready to go out to the field, we were going on early on Monday morning. I went to the doctor on Sunday afternoon. We had some free time. So I went over to see the doctor. And when I got over there, I had a 103-degree fever. And they listened to my chest and determined that I had pneumonia. Now, I could hear the doctors outside of the little office that I was sitting in, and they were deciding whether or not they needed to send me over to the hospital to be admitted. They finally came back in and they said, hey, we're going to give you a prescription for antibiotics. We want you to go back to the barracks. Don't do anything. You're on bed rest for 2 days, and then come back and see us in 2 days. If it's not starting to clear up, then they were possibly going to admit me at that time. So needless to say, I was pretty disappointed with what was going on, but still I felt like I'd been run over by a truck. I went back to the barracks, and I went in the first sergeant's office, and I gave him the orders that I'd gotten from the medical clinic telling me that I was supposed to be on bed rest. Well, the first sergeant, I don't know if you've ever known many first sergeants, they're pretty tough guys, and this guy was one of them. He had very little sympathy for my situation and had very little sympathy for the predicament that I was in. And we'd been there for several weeks. We were building up to this point, and his advice to me was, you can either stay here and stay in bed and hopefully you'll get better, or you can go out to the field and train with everybody else and graduate on time. He said, if you stay here and stay in bed, then I'll see you back next year, because we're going to recycle you and we'll bring you back next year. Well, man, that next year thing didn't really fit in well with me. I wasn't sure what I was going to do about it, but did not like the sound of having to come back and start over again the next year. And plus, it was going to put me another year behind in what I was wanting to do career-wise. So I went back to the barracks, to my barracks, and I showed the order to my platoon leader, who was a captain in the Army. I gave him the letter, and he gave me direct order. You stay here in bed. Don't get out of bed. It's the doctor's orders. So you stay here in bed, and we'll see you when we get back. So the next morning, I still felt miserable. Everybody got up early. They were getting ready, getting all their gear ready to go out to the field. And man, I just felt like I'd been beat with a 2x4. And I was laying there in bed as everybody was getting ready and just did not know what to do. Everybody got ready. They got out into the area just beyond the barracks that we were staying in formation, and they were going to make a 20-mile road march to begin the Warrior Week, to begin that week-long training in the field. And I remember watching them from the barracks window and just honestly not knowing what to do. So as I was sitting there conflicted on what to do in the bed, the first sergeant came walking into the barracks. He saw me sitting there on the bed, and man, he just lit into me. He was questioning whether or not I had what it took to be a leader. He questioned my manhood, and he called me a few things that to this day I'm still not sure what those were. But he lit into me pretty good, and it was really the motivation that I needed. I got up out of bed. I still felt horrible. Got my boots on, got them laced up. I got my stuff together. I got out of the barracks, but the platoon, the company, had already left the area on their road march. So the first sergeant had a little bit of mercy on me. He said, instead of making this 20-mile road march, there's a mess truck that's getting ready to go out. Throw all your gear in the back of that truck, and you'll ride the truck out to the bivouac area where we're setting up for the night. So I grabbed all my stuff from the barracks, and as I was walking out the door, I remembered that prescription that I had for the antibiotics. I went back to my footlocker. I grabbed that prescription, and also inside my footlocker I had this small Ziploc bag. So I grabbed the prescription, I stuck it inside the Ziploc bag, sealed it up, stuck it in my pocket, ran out, hopped on the back of the truck, and I was able to get a little bit of rest while I rode in the truck out to the field where we would be setting up for the night. We arrived at the stop, and I was able to get a little bit more rest, and early that evening the company arrived from their road march, and we began setting up for the night. It was going to be our last night of any kind of rest prior to starting the combat mission early the next morning. So we got tents set up, and back in those days each soldier carried half a canvas tent on their back. So you'd have half a tent, your sleeping bag, a roll to roll or a mat to sleep on, and all the other odds and ends, your canteen, eating equipment, your weapon, all that kind of stuff you carried with you. You carried everything on your back. So you'd set up with a buddy or a teammate, and each of you would use half of your tent shell that you carried on your back, and together you could make one whole tent that was just big enough for the two of you to lay down in. So I'd found somebody, we set up for the night, we got our tent set up, and no sooner did we get set up than it began to rain. So what started as a pretty easy rain quickly turned into one of those Kansas kind of rains where the sky turned pitch black, the wind started picking up, and it started pouring down rain. We got inside our tents, and the best we could, and the guys that didn't have their tent stakes into the ground real well, they started having to hold on to the canvas because the wind was picking up and it was blowing tents down and pulling stakes up out of the ground if people didn't have them hammered into the ground well. Well, shortly after that, they started ordering us to go into a nearby dried out ditch because they had just got a radio report that came in from headquarters that a tornado was on its way directly towards us. So they evacuated us from our bivouac site, put us about 50 feet over in this dried out ditch. Was about the only place that we had to go out there. So here we are in this ditch in pouring down rain. The winds were howling at this point, and we could hear some of the tents being pulled up and blown around in our bivouac site not too far away. So as we got to the ditch, the winds really started to pick up. And we were a little bit protected from the wind being out in that dried up creek bed, but we weren't really protected from the rain and the water, because it seems that in Kansas, when there's a real heavy rain like we were experiencing right there, those dried out creek beds become active creek beds real quickly. So before we knew it, we were standing in shoulder deep water. Now, it wasn't quick rushing water, it had a little bit of movement to it, but it was coming through there, and now we're standing there in neck deep water. The winds are howling around us, the sky was pitch black, and I was beginning to wonder whether or not I had made the right choices in life. So I'm still sick, and I still had 103-degree fever. Felt like I'd been run over by that deuce-and-a-half truck that I'd ridden in on. And now here I am in a tornado. I'm standing neck deep in water, and the skies are pitch black. And to be honest, I was ready to give up. I was ready to call it quits. I looked up to the sky, and the skies were black, and I said a little silent prayer, asking God to help me through this. And I'm not exaggerating this at all, but 10 seconds, it was literally 10 seconds after saying that prayer, that one of the soldiers who was off to my left shoulder began to sing. His name was Sean, and Sean had made his singing talents known already. In road marches and singing around the barracks, this guy could really sing. He was in the bunk next to me in the barracks, and he was, really a talented singer. But just out of nowhere, in the midst of all this rain, in the midst of being in the middle of a tornado, I hear over my left shoulder someone say, "This one's for Morris." And he started to sing Amazing Grace. Now, I had just said a prayer asking for God to help me, and out of nowhere, Sean begins to sing Amazing Grace in the most beautiful a cappella rendition I've ever heard in my life. This guy could sing. And to say that it was inspiring and that God inspired me from that song would be an understatement. In fact, when he was done singing, I was ready to take the world on. God had reached down into that ditch in the midst of the flood and in the midst of that tornado, in the midst of 103-degree fever, and in the midst of my pneumonia, and had given me strength and given me encouragement. It inspired me so much because God showed his presence in a very real way. Because just seconds before, I was looking up to the sky saying, "God, where are you? Why is this happening to me?" And God showed me that he knew exactly where I was. And not only did he know exactly where I was, but he was right there in that ditch with me. So the winds and the rain eventually died down, and by this time it was dark. We got out, and the best that we could with the flashlights that we had, we tried to recover the tents that were blown all around and get something set up for the night. And then it began to really get cold because that storm had brought a cold front into Kansas. So after we got things settled down, we got our tent built back up. I was ready to go to bed for the night. I reached in my front pocket and I remembered that prescription. And there that prescription was, sealed up in a Ziploc bag. Though it had been underwater for about 45 minutes while we were waiting out the storm, it had stayed completely dry. So I opened it up, I popped one of those pills in my mouth, and I swallowed it down with a canteen mouthful of water. I knew at that point that God was with me, but I also knew it was going to be a long week, and it was. It was a tough week. But we eventually got through that week, got through advanced camp, but God taught me a very valuable lesson in that experience. He taught me that things will get hard, and sometimes when you don't think they can get any harder, they do. And it's at those times when you look up and you reach for God, He gives you the strength to get you through. And not only will God get you through from a distance, but God will be right there with you, and He'll walk hand in hand to help you get through whatever situation you're facing in life. Since my video about my eye, I've received so many messages from you guys. Some of you providing words of encouragement, and some of you guys wanting to share your story. And honestly, my story pales in comparison to what a lot of you guys have been through. And I honestly don't know how people get through life without God in their life, without that support of knowing God and knowing that He is there to help get you through those tough times in your life. So I just want to encourage you guys to keep moving forward. Don't give up. Just keep moving forward. And whatever you're facing, know that God is there for you, and He loves you, and He will help you get through that storm if you just look up to the clouds and ask Him for help. So after returning from the field, the entire barracks was just exhausted. We'd got back, everything was cleaned up, everything was put away for the night, and it was finally time to get a full night's sleep. And I remember laying my head down in that big open bay barracks. There wasn't much commotion going on, just about everybody was asleep at that point. And I remember letting a big exhale out, thinking, okay, man, you did it. You got through this. You're gonna finish with your class, and you're gonna finish on time. So the barracks was dark, there wasn't a whole lot of commotion going on, and I was laying there. And you remember Sean, the guy that sang Amazing Grace out in the field? And out of nowhere, just out of complete silence, I hear, "How did you do that?" He said, "I'm exhausted, Kevin, and you got through that entire week, and you went out there with 103-degree fever, sick. How did you do that?" And honestly, the only answer that I could come up with was God. It wasn't something that I had done. It wasn't something because of my strength. It was something because God reached out into that ditch when I was ready to give up, and He gave me strength. Was the only way that I could explain it to Sean. And in the midst of that conversation, I told Sean who God was to me and what God had done for me in my life. I explained who Jesus was in His death, burial, and resurrection, and what that means for Christians and what it means for me. Sean and I had a discussion there in the middle of that big open bay barracks, and he asked some questions, and sometimes I had answers for it, and sometimes the most honest answer was, I don't know. But we had that conversation, and then Sean just kind of out of the blue said, "I want God in my life." So I sat up on the edge of the bed and I said, "Hey, Sean, let's pray about it. Let's talk to God about it." And Sean got up and he walked over and we got ready to pray. And then out of the silence, a bunk that was on the other side of the barracks, I heard a voice say, "Hey, I want that too." And the three of us knelt there next to my bunk, and those two guys asked God into their heart and accepted Jesus as their Savior and ask them to come in and change their lives. So if you're watching this and you're one of those people that has been seeking God but don't know how to get there, just reach out, trust in God, and know that He is there for you. So somewhere there's a guy who rides a Harley. He's got dirt under his fingernails and a life full of bad decisions, but he knows that he needs God in his life. Just reach out and talk to Him. Pray this evening and ask God to come into your life and help you get things situated. There's a guy who rides a BMW. He's got everything that the world can offer. He's got a good job. It looks like he's got his life under control. But when the lights go out and it gets quiet in the house, he knows that everything's not all right. He knows that there's something missing in his life. Well, God has answers for you as well. So no matter where life finds you, it doesn't matter the decisions that you've made in the past. It doesn't matter the kind of family you were raised in, whether you're male or female. It doesn't even matter if you ride a scooter. God has a plan for your life. I am a testimony of the saving power of Jesus Christ. And if something is missing in your life, just look and talk to God and ask Him to come into your life and to help you get things figured out. So I love you guys, and it doesn't matter whether we agree or disagree on this. I can live with it either way. If nothing else, we're brothers and sisters on two wheels, and that is a camaraderie that is honestly close to what you find in the military, a kinship and a brotherhood, because riding on two wheels draws people together, and I'm sure you guys have experienced that as well. So I just want to say thank you for watching MCrider. Thank you for commenting and sharing and supporting the effort. You guys are awesome. I can't thank you enough for the words of encouragement that I get from you guys and your support in the comments that I get on YouTube and the personal messages that I get from you guys. You're awesome, and I can't wait to come back next Friday with a new training video for you. So until next week, guys, this is Kevin with MCrider, and we'll see you on the road.